Hi, welcome to the fifth session of SAP FICO training. Today's session is about accounts payable. In today's session, we will be covering the above points. First, overview on accounts payable, define vendor account groups, number ranges for vendor account groups, define vendor tolerance, creation of GL as reconciliation accounts, vendor master payment terms, define cash discount for outgoing payments, creation of vendor master records, and unit testing. Coming to the overview part, accounts payable module is the first subledger to FIGL used for managing vendors. It is an integral part of purchasing system, hence most of the data in accounts payable module is obtained from material management module. Even it is integrated with treasury module and accounts receivable module as well. So AP module allows you to manage the most complex of AP transactions. With SAP's accounts payable system, a company can easily manage its payment to provide maximum cash discount and avail cash position on its liabilities. So in simple terms, accounts payable records and administers accounting data for all vendors. It delivers and invoices are managed according to vendors, and payables are paid with payment programs. This is a very important part of FICO. Vendor account groups. Vendor account groups is the key concept in accounts payable. The account group is a classifying feature within the vendor master records. It controls the number ranges of vendor account and the vendor status in the vendor master records. Even vendor groups allows you to have separate purposes and field status for different types of vendors. For example, you could have a group of regular vendor or a group of domestic vendor and a group of one-time vendors. By separating these different types of vendors into different vendor groups, you can make different fields required, optional, or suppressed for each of the groups. The first step in the configuration of vendor master data is to create your vendor groups. Once you have gathered all your requirements and know what the groups should be, you are ready to go for the configurations. Now take a live example. When you do the implementation or configuration for the AP module in any of the client, you first group your vendors in that particular organization into different groups, because you could be providing services or selling goods to number of different groups. Like there could be a domestic group, there could be a retail vendor group, or there could be a wholesale vendor group, there could be a service group as well, service vendor group. So in what way you want to manage your vendors, accordingly you make those groups. These groups are made because you could have a simple reports on the basis of that. In today's world, the management is more interested in knowing what is the total purchases from the domestic vendor, what is the purchases of services from the vendor, how much total retail purchases have been done or wholesale purchases have been done. So if you make these groups of vendors, you can easily have those reports from SAP system. Even you can segregate your vendors on the basis of those groups, and it becomes easier to identify whether a particular vendor of yours is a service vendor, or is a domestic vendor, or is an import vendor, what kind of a vendor he is. That is why we always create vendor groups. Moving to the next, as we already did in the GL, a unique number range is assigned to each business partner record master records. Business partner master records means the vendor master records. Unique number is to access the vendor master record. A number range can be valid for more than one account group. Number range could be externally or internally. If you remember in the last session, we did general ledger configuration. In that also we talked about account group. That account group refers to general ledger account group, where we made the grouping of accounts like asset, liabilities, expenses and revenues, and we defined a number range to them. A grouping of asset was done, a range was defined. For liabilities, revenues or expenses, a range was defined. That means that particular series will be used for asset, for liabilities or for respective expenses or revenues. Same way over here we define a range to the group. You could use the same range for all the groups. You could define different range to different groups as well. It depends upon you which group, what number you want to take it as. You want to maintain the same number for all the groups, or you want to have separate number ranges for different vendor groups. We prefer to put different number range for different vendor groups because it becomes easier to identify with that particular initials of the number range that refers to a particular group, which part of the group, whether it is a part of a service vendor group or a one-time vendor group or maybe a domestic vendor group, whichever it may be. And that particular range is defined to the number vendor account groups, on the basis of which whenever you create any vendor master, that number is assigned as an automatic vendor master number by the system. Now, number range could be externally or internally. It depends upon you whether you want to go internally or externally, but as a standard practice, one should go with the internally defined number ranges. If you go for externally, you have to maintain those external codes somewhere within in your Excel, and later on when you create the next vendor, you have to go and cross check what was the last you have put up as a number range as a vendor code. So defining internally so that the system could easily identify and generate automatic number is preferred. Just like an example, you can see these are the account groups with you. You could have these different groups of vendors. It could be a material vendor who supplies you raw materials, semi-finished goods to you. You can assign that particular material group or raw material vendor group as well. You can say a different number range could be assigned to them. Even there are two number range over here in material vendor, because you may have two different groups. Like you could have one as a raw material vendor group, you could have a different one as semi-finished material vendor group. So it's up to you whether you want to classify in those two part or you just want to have it as material vendor, and accordingly you can have the number range, and later on we assign this number range to the group so that linking can be done and system could easily identify. Same way you can have a different number ranges for service vendors, for finance vendors, for one-time vendor, and for any other vendors like import vendor, domestic vendor, or anything as such. So in this way you need to define your vendor groups, and accordingly you define your number ranges to them so that it can generate its own code with that respective group, and it will be easier for you to identifying in the business. Moving next is to vendor tolerance group. Tolerance is basically defined is used for cash discount and differences in payment processing. Tolerance limits can be defined either as an absolute amount or as a percentage of amount received or paid. As we did in the GL, we defined tolerance for cash discount, for payment differences. Even we defined tolerance as an absolute amount for as well as the percentage for differences in payment as well, if you remember. So these things restrict the system that you cannot give discount above than what tolerance has been fixed, or you cannot give more payment or less payment than the differences from the invoice, and you can assign that particular absolute amount or a percentage to them, and the system checks according to that, and it take care of this of what the payment you are doing and all. Vendor tolerance account, sorry, vendor reconciliation account. Reconciliation accounts are managed implicitly using subledger function. The reconciliation account ensures integration of vendor subledger into the general ledger. More often, reconciliation accounts are managed implicitly using subledger. As said, when you post transactions to a subsidiary ledger, which is termed as subledger over here, like vendor subledger, the system automatically posts the same data to the general ledger. It automatically posts to the general ledger because we assign that reconciliation account to the vendor subledger. That is why it automatically posts to the general ledger. So you need to assign one reconciliation, because the reason behind that is whatever financials you prepare, financials are prepared on the basis of the ledgers. So until you assign any ledger to the vendor subledger, how the value from the vendor will flow to the ledger? So the logic is, so as to flow the value to the general ledgers, you need to assign that particular ledger to vendor account, and that is what is termed as reconciliation account. Means the ledger which you assign in the vendor master is termed as reconciliation account. As you can see over here, there are different groups of, these are different vendor groups, which is in green part, sorry, in yellow part, and these are different vendors. Now in the orange part, these are termed as the reconciliation account. You create reconciliation ledger account as domestic, import vendor or other vendors, raw material other than raw material or other vendors, and you assign those ledgers in these vendor masters on the green part. If you want to flow the values of vendor 1 in domestic vendors, then you need to assign the domestic vendor reconciliation ledger to vendor 1 master data. Same way, if you want to get the values posted to import vendor, then you need to assign the import vendor reconciliation ledger to the vendor 2, and accordingly the system picks the values and posts it to the ledger accounts. Payment terms. Key for defining payment terms composed of cash discount percentages and payment periods. Payment term is used in sales orders, purchase orders, and invoices. Terms of payment provide information for cash management, payment transactions. Now moving on more on it, payment term is used basically to define, to know, or the system will let you know which of the invoices are due for payment. First. Second, if you make an early payment, how much cash discount will you be receiving? So when we create a payment term, we define how much due date or how much the term of payment will be, so that the payment could be processed accordingly. So the system automatically let you know when the payment is due. And if you make any payment before the due date, the system will also let you know the cash discount if you have maintained the cash discount percentages and time period on it. So payment term basically calculate your cash discounts, and it let you know the payment periods when the payment for the vendor is due for the invoices. Defining cash discount for outgoing payments. Here we define the account number for cash discount received account. The system posts the cash discount amount to these accounts when clearing open items in the vendors. Now, when you make payments to any of the vendor invoices, at times you get cash discount when you make early payments. So the cash discount will obviously go to certain ledger account, so that ledger will take the values to the income statement. So that ledger account is assigned over here as a customization part, and that is what we will be looking in when we will be doing the configurations in SAP. Creation of vendor master records. Vendor master is a subsidiary ledger of sundry creditors. Vendor master controls how business transactions are recorded and processed by the system. Two ways to create vendor master data in SAP. Sundry creditors is a reconciliation ledger under current liabilities, and this reconciliation account, that is sundry creditor, which we assign in the vendor master. These sundry creditors can also be segregated, means a number of reconciliation account could be prepared on the basis of the different groups, so that you could have reports of sundry creditor group wise. Like sundry creditor have got different kind of a creditor, as already discussed, vendor groups, vendor account groups. So this is more related to that part, where sundry creditor can be categorized, or a reconciliation account for sundry creditor can be differentiated on the basis of domestic vendor group, service vendor group, material vendor group, and all. So we create different reconciliation account, and we assign different reconciliation account to the different vendor groups, so that the values can be easily checked for each of the groups. Now this is what we will be doing in the configuration part. We'll be first defining the account groups, then the number range for the vendor masters, assigning number range to vendor account groups, define vendor tolerance, creation of GL as reconciliation account, maintain document number range. Then we will be creating the payment terms. However, payment terms, there are certain payment term as a standard, but we will be creating a new one and we'll see how it works. Defining cash discount for outgoing payment, then creating the vendor master records, and then we'll look after to the unit testing part. So first is, let's move on to SAP system, how these things can be done in SAP. So let's move on to the SAP system. Now first we'll be taking up is the defining the vendor account group, and for vendor account group the path is as under. First you need to go to the financial accounting, then accounts receivable and payable, then to vendor account. Now we will be first, let's move on over here. As you know, SPRO is the transaction code which you have to run first. Enter. Then you have to go to SAP reference IMG, click on it. Then we need to, now we are in FI part, so we'll go to financial accounting new, expand. Now we are working on accounts payable, and accounts payable in this part, accounts receivable and payable part. We'll be expanding this further. So now right now we are working under accounts vendor accounts, so we'll open the vendor accounts part, we'll expand the vendor accounts, and now we'll go to the master data as in the tab in the PPT, master data, then the preparation for master data. Now we'll be going over here, preparation for creating vendor master record. As you can see, preparation for creating vendor master record, and then the defining vendor groups. So now again expanding this part as we expanded. Now you can see over here, define vendor groups with the screen layout vendor. Now over here we create the vendor groups. So for that you need to click on this particular icon, that is to execute. System is slightly slow. Let's check. It should not take so long. So you can see the heading change view vendor account group overview. You can see over here that there are options of new entries, copy, delete. Now over here if you want any group to be deleted, you can select that group from over here and you can even delete that. If you want to copy, you can copy that. Now let's come up over here. You can see different groups are already there created by people who have done the practice over here in it. Now you can see there are goods supplier, there are plant vendor, there are special vendors, again in below there are vendor distribution center. If you will further go downside, you will find different further vendors groups as well. So if you go below, let's see the employee vendors are there. So there are a lot of different vendor groups which people have already created, like uh, one time vendor, domestic vendor is again there, vendors training is also there. So now what we will be creating over here would be that, let's suppose in industries there are different kind of a vendor. There are vendors who give you services for different part, like IT services or any other services for that matter. So you have got one as a service vendor, and there could be different vendor from whom you purchase materials and all. So there could be a material vendor, then again you purchase remaining other things, then there could be a different vendor as well. So suppose for example I am taking services and I need to create a service vendor group for them. So I will go over here in it and will create a service vendor group over here. So I can go to this new entries, I can name it over here the group as something as I wish to. Suppose I name it as SVEN, or you can name it as SERV, which refer to service. So it can be easily identified from the first four initials. So we can write it over as service vendor group. So you can see this. Now once you name it, you can even go to these fields as well. These you can see over here, these are field status, and in the basic setting we discussed about field status, that field status basically gives you the facility of making any field as required, optional or suppressed. So suppose when you go to this general data tab, there are different things like address, communication, control, payment transactions, contact person. Suppose you go to contact person. In contact person there is nothing else, just optional entries or contact person. If you want the contact person as a required entry, that means that you must need to fill the contact person in the vendor master when you will create for service vendor group. So for every different vendor group you could have different field status as required, optional, display or suppressed. So let's move on back and do something else as a mandatory part. Let's take address. You can see over here everything is optional over here, but I think I need few things as a mandatory part. For example, I need this name one as a required part. That means I need to fill this name one always. Next you can have as, okay, you can even have your search term as required field. What does this mean? This means that when we will be creating vendor master, these two fields you have to fill anyhow, because these have become mandatory. So selecting these two and go to the save option and save it. That means any service vendor, service vendor means any vendor which is a part of service vendor group, they need to fill those two things over here in the that is address one and search term. Now in the same way, if you go back, even there is a communication address. If you want the communication to be mandatorily filled, then even you can make that communication as a mandatory option over here. So if you want any language to be made mandatory, you can select over here as language is mandatory. If you want the mobile telephone number to be made mandatory, you can select that required field over here and you can go to the save option, so that will become mandatory over here. Otherwise it is an optional, you fill it or not, the system will allow you to proceed. So that is a part, that is an important part that field status is all about. Now same way, this is the general group. Same way you can go to the company code data. In company code data you can fill these different parts, so you can double click on them. Again for account group, now every master data must have a reconciliation account, because if it doesn't have the reconciliation account, that means it will not be able to take the values to the ledger, and if it doesn't flows to the ledger, that means your financials cannot be prepared. So what we do over here is we put reconciliation account as mandatory field. That means whenever you create any vendor for that matter in service vendor group, it will ask you to fill the reconciliation account. Same way you can fill other things as a mandatory as well, but in general we always make this reconciliation account as mandatory. Rest is up to the client what they need as a mandatory and what they not. So we can go to the save option and we save it. Same way you can work for the other options in the purchasing data as well. So moving back, we have created our service vendor group. Going back, so you can see over here SERV, serve means service vendor group has been created for me. So once this service vendor group is created, now we will be creating the number range for vendor master. So you created the group, now a group will be assigned to a range, and that range will be used for creating vendor masters. So from that range a code will be generated every time a new vendor will be created. So we'll be assigning a number range to that particular vendors group. That is like we just created the service vendor group, so I will be assigning a range to the service vendor group, and whenever we will create any vendor in service vendor group, automatically that number range will be assigned as a code to the vendor account. So let's move back, and you can see over here now that on the below part there is an option of create number range for vendor account, as you can see over here. So by this we create the number range, and that number range work as a vendor code for the vendors created in SAP. So let's click on it, execute. Now you can see with this display, this is a display option which will only display you what is already there in the system. So you can see there are already number ranges are already defined. So you always need to see that this serial number should not be used again, because duplicacy of serial number or duplicacy of these ranges are not allowed. So suppose this 6 is already been used, so I will be using a seventh serial number as a serial number part, and will be assigning certain range to it. So let's move up over back, because this is in the display mode. I would be going to this particular as a change intervals option. Click on this. Now I moved over here, and whenever you move over here you can see this plus interval. So to insert any interval, to add any interval in this, you need to insert this interval tab over here. So clicking over here you will see the pop-up will come to you. Now you must know that the number which is coming over here should not be repeated over here. If I repeat, suppose over here 01 is there, if I repeat the 01 over here, the system will not allow you. You can see interval already available because 01 is already there. So you need to take something which is not there in the system. So as we already checked, 06 is already there, but 07 is not there in the system. So we'll be taking one as 07. Now what number range shall I give from this to this? So that is up to you, whatever number range you wish to give. Suppose for example I give it as 40,000 to 4999. I want my vendor to be created with these codes. So I just plus this. Now interval overlap, there are certain interval which has already been there in the system. So you can see this 01 which is coming over here already include this 4000 to 40999. So what I would be doing, I just added one more zero to it. And I put it over here as okay. So I put this over here as this. Now let me add. Does it allow? So it allowed me to add it because the number range was not there, and it allowed me to take it this to this number. So this number which I just filled it over as 40 million to 40,999,999, this is what the code which will be generated for the vendors, which we will create later on. So this is what I have created, and I can save this from over here. So must remember that 07 is the number range which I have created, and I need to use it. So just saved it. Now we've created a number range for it. There are alternative transaction code as well if you directly want to use it too, else the path is there. Moving next is assigning the number range to the vendor account group. Now assigning the number range to the vendor account group means that this range which I just created will be assigned to the service vendor group. So whenever a vendor will be created under service vendor group, the code generated to the vendor will be with 40 million. 40 million 1, 40 million 2, 40 million 3. That particular sequence system will be generating automatically. So let's move on to assign this. The very next row you can see assign number range to vendor account groups. So you can go to this execute part, and in this you can search your own service vendor. If you don't know, you can even go to this position. If you remember the vendor group SERV, so we can enter on it, and you can see the service vendor group comes up over here. And if you want your number range, then you can even go to this select option over here, selection option, and you can create your assign your number range by this. So we created this 7th, we assigned it over here, and you can save it. So this is how a vendor group is created, then a range is created, and that range is assigned to that particular group. Even if you want, you can have a different group created as well later on, and if you want this number 07 to be used with that group as well, you can assign it. Just like below you can see this vendor forwarding agent and these vendors are using the same range XXXXX. So you can use the same range with multiple vendor groups, or if you want, you can have separate number ranges for all these separate vendor groups. So it's up to you how you want to take it in the SAP system. Moving back, now the next configuration is defining vendor tolerance group. So for vendor tolerance group, we will be going to business transaction, open item, clearing, then clearing differences. So now we can go to close the vendor master. Now we'll be going to this business transaction. In business transaction, we need to go to open item clearing. So open item clearing is here, and then we will be going next to clearing differences. So there is clearing differences, and in clearing differences you can see define tolerance for customers and vendors. So that is what this is one of the option, or the second option is OBA3. This is the transaction code if you want to go to that. So going to it, defining tolerance, basically if you want to read further, you can go to this IMG activity document. It will even explain you what does this is all about. So this is how you can go for it. In this activity, you define a tolerance for customer and vendors. The tolerance are used for dealing with payment differences and residual item that may arise when the payment clearing is carried out. For each tolerance group, specify the following, and all those you can go through it and you can have a look at it. So if you need the details to read, you can go to this text and you can read it from over here, the document part of it. So now moving on to this explore option. Now I need to create my own tolerance for my own company code. So I need to go to new. I went to new entries. Now over here I will be putting up my company code 1200. Moving next, tolerance group. If you want to assign tolerance group to a particular users, then you can create tolerance groups. You can have n number of different tolerance groups because different tolerance groups will have different limits, and all those limits will vary to the user IDs. So as you want, you can assign those tolerance groups. Now moving over here to the below part, you can see permitting payment differences. So how much payment differences do you allow on the upper side or on the lower side? Suppose I put 100 or suppose 500, and I put over here as 5% and over here as 5%. Now payment differences basically means the difference between invoice and the payment. You can maximum has a difference of 500 in between the invoice and the payment. You cannot have more than that difference. So or you can have a percentage defined over here. So you cannot make a payment beyond to the base amount or the percentage, whichever is lower side. So that is what the system will allow it to you. And in the below part, permitting payment differences for automatic write-up. Automatic write-up means the system will automatically post that difference to written off GL account. So that is also we define over here as suppose 100, and over here if you wish you can put the percentage. If you don't, you can leave the percentage as well. Specification for posting residual item from payment differences. This is not used as a standard practice, so we'll be not discussing this. So this is what you have to take care, and you can test it later on when we'll be doing the unit testing part. So you can save this part over here, and your tolerance for vendor has been defined. Now once the tolerance has been defined, now moving up to the next is creation of GL as reconciliation account. So moving up to reconciliation account, as already said, reconciliation account, when we post any transaction to a subsidiary ledger, the system automatically posts the same data to the general ledger. More or less, accounts payable is a sub ledger. The reconciliation account is the GL account updated by AP transactions using this vendor account. Different vendors or vendor groups can update different reconciliation account or can have even the same reconciliation accounts as well. So now we will be creating a vendor reconciliation account in this case, and we'll see how this works. So for this we have to go to the transaction code FS00 to create a GL, or we can go with the path as well. So I'm going with the transaction code, and you can follow the path to create this GL master. So now going up over here, this is FS00. Now in this case, now suppose I'm creating a vendor reconciliation account, means a vendor account, vendor GL, and a vendor GL must be a current liability. So now I need to have a current liability number over here which GL should be created. So what number can I have? For that I need to go to OBD4. In OBD4 I will check for my liability sides. You can see the chart of account is 1000, and in this the liability grouping is from 2 to 299999. So I will have to take the series of 2 to create a vendor account. So now let's check first which are the liabilities which are already created in the system with the series 2. So for the series 2, in it you can see with 2 a loan account is already existing. That means the second liability which I can create will be 200001 for vendors. So now moving over here, 200001, you have to put it the number for the next to be created, and then you have to go to this new, click on the new part, so it will give you the options to create a new one. Now over here you need to select your account group. As you can see in OBD4, this is the account group, and your account group for vendor account, that is a part of current liabilities, liability. So you have to select the group as liability over here. So I would be selecting my group as liability. Now a liability is a part of balance sheet, so I have to select the radio button balance sheet part, and then you can write the text. Suppose the vendor which I am creating is a domestic vendor, so I can write it over here as domestic vendor. The same thing you will be putting up on the below side, account. So now this is the first screen, that is the description, where we select the account group, then whether that group represents to the balance sheet or profit and loss account you have to select, and then you have to put the description over here. Now we'll be moving up to the next, that is the control data. Now moving to the control data, in this you have to fill the text category. So suppose the text category I take is for all, that is the star, so that all the text codes will be applicable on this. I took the star. If any of the text codes will be taken, the system will allow for this particular ledger, and you have to select this posting without text as well. So suppose any transaction there is no text code, even then the system will allow you to take the transactions. Now as already said, this ledger which we are creating is a reconciliation ledger for vendors. So that is why at this tab, reconciliation account, for account type, you need to select which reconciliation part this will be. So this is a part of a vendor, so I have to select the vendor reconciliation, so that whenever any transactions will take place in the vendor account, that particular transaction will automatically get float in this ledger as well. So that is what you need to take it as, and over here you have to select the line item display. Whenever you select any reconciliation account over here, that means it will also consist the open item management itself, so you cannot click or you cannot tick this open item management when you have already taken any of the reconciliation over here. So we just have to take the line item display, so that whenever a transaction will take place, that transaction will reflect you in the reports. So this is what you have to take in this particular part. Now moving up to the next is create bank and interest. Clicking on it. Now in this we have to select the filled status groups. So whenever you do different nature of transactions, you have got different filled status groups. For example, if we do F4 with the key on the keyboard, you will see a list of filled status groups will be reflected in this. So in this case, now what we need to take is, we are doing transactions related to reconciliation account, so we need to have a reconciliation account over here. So for creating a ledger for reconciliation purposes, we need to select the G067 for reconciliation accounts. So that is what you need to take over here. So this groups will vary as per the different nature of ledgers you will be operating, and accordingly it will keep on varying. So we'll see this as we move to the other sub modules in the FI part. So this is what you need to select, and when you save this over here, this will allow you to create your ledger. So you can see this enter sort in this. Now you will make it okay. There should not be any red error over here, otherwise everything is alright. So selecting it okay, your ledger will be created. So this is how you need to create your own reconciliation, vendor reconciliation GL account. A bit slow. So you can say the data is saved. Data is saved means your ledger is created. So the same ledger, now if you go back and I can again go to this, and this will allow me to see my own, put the GL number over here and then put enter. It will show you the detail which has been created. So this is what basically is display part. So once a ledger is already created, whenever you will see in this, that will be shown in the display options. So you can go to control data, whatever we have filled is reflected. You can go to create bank and interest, that is reflected. Then again, now there are certain things which you should know, like over here you can go to this information part. In information you can see that when was this particular ledger created and who created this ledger, and if is in this particular ledger if any changes will take place, with this change document you can even check those changes. So right now we have just created, there is no changes at all, so that is it all about. So we have created the reconciliation account over here. Once we have created reconciliation account, now we will be moving to the next, that is maintaining the document number range. So if you remember, in accounting we maintain the document number range as 01. Now same way we will be maintaining number range over here. So there are basically two type of transactions majorly which take place in the case of vendors. One is booking the vendor invoice and second is payment to the vendor. So now we'll be looking after like OBA7. In this you can see that there are basically two types of document type which are used, and they all start with K because we are dealing with vendor. You already we discussed that account key for vendor is K. So for K there is only two things which take place, that is one is vendor invoice, another is vendor key, vendor payment. So for vendor invoice you can see, double clicking on it, you can see that there is a 19 number range is already there, and if you go back and if you see for payment there is a 15 as a document number range is there. Now what does this means? This means that this is the serial number of document number. This is by standard. So what we need to do is we need to create two number ranges, document number range which has to be defined. One is for 19 and one is for 15. 19 is for document number range for vendor invoices, that is KR, and 15 is for vendor payment, that is KZ. So to create the number range we need to go to FBN1. So going to FBN1 as in the screen, FBN1 as we already did in the ledger, general ledgers accounting, that we created the document number, same way we will be creating the document number over here. So you need to fill the company code over here 1200. Now we will be creating two document number range, that will be two document number range serial number, that is as we seen in the vendor document type, that is KR and KZ. KR document number series was 19 and for vendor payment that was 15. So we'll be creating these two over here. Now we'll go to this interval to create. I need to create two, that is one is for 19 and one is for 15. Now we'll go to 19. We need to put, now keep things over here how these number ranges work. 19 is the serial number which I have put up for vendor invoice as it was mentioned in KR. Now you need to put the year over here for which fiscal year you want. Right now the fiscal year which is running around is 2014. So if your fiscal year is something else, you need to put that fiscal year, because the number range, accounting document number range, changes every year. Every year you have to create new number ranges, or you can copy the existing previous year number ranges to the new year. So we'll be taking up 2014 as a fiscal year, and now I will be defining what will be the number range over here. So suppose the number range over here is this, I will be just taking the same and I will be just making certain changes. I want my vendor invoice to be booked is with 19, so that it will be easier for me to understand. So 19 is the serial number. For invoice also I am putting the same thing, 19. So 19 09999. I can put it over here, and now I have defined this to this, and I can plus it. So plus it will add on to it. In the same way, you can go to this plus again, and you can create the serial number or the document number range for 15 now. So for 15 you have to put over 15, you have to put the fiscal year 2014. Now you can put a number range. It depends upon you how and what number range you want to have. You can have accordingly, you can do the working of that. So now I would be taking it as 15, insert. Now these are the two which I have entered, and I can now go to the save option, and your document number range will be created. Now add on, okay, continue. So your number range for 15 and 19 is created. Now do remember this 15 serial number is for vendor payment, that is KZ document type, and 19 is for vendor invoice, that is KR. So your number range is over, and this is what will give you the accounting document number, a unique accounting document number for vendor invoice or for vendor payment as well. Now moving to the next is payment terms. We discussed earlier, payment term is basically used for determining the due date of the invoice, and if in case the payment is made before the due date, what will be the cash discount, what will be the rebate in that. So that is what has been calculated in this case. So for creating payment term by SAP side, there are certain payment term that are as standard. If you want to create your own payment term, you can have your own payment term created as well. How this works, let's see. So we can see the payment term now, that the transaction for that is OBB8. So now we can go to the SAP system, and we can run /n to exit the screen, and OBB8 to enter the payment term screen. So OBB8, now in OBB8 you can see these are the standard payment terms which are provided by the SAP itself. If you need to use it, you can use these all. Now as you can see, the payment term 0001, that is for immediate payment. That means you don't want to hold for any due date, you just punch in the invoice and later on you can make the payment immediately after that. So in that case you can use this payment term. There is another payment term 0002, that is for if the payment is 30 days, 2% discount will be there. If you make the payment within 14 days, there is a discount of 3%. So that is the terms of payment with the vendor which varies. So if you make the payment within 14 days, you get the discount of 3%. If you make the payment within 30 days, you get the discount of 2% by the vendor as per the agreement, and if you make it within 40 days, then only the net amount is to be paid. There is no discount in that. So there could be different number of terms which are set with the vendors. As you can see below, again there is a different term again. In this case 14 days 2%, 30 days 1.5%, and 45 days there is nothing. So there could be different payment terms. If you go page down, there could be number of other payment terms as well allowed over there. So you need to see which you want to use, and if case there is a different payment term which is not applicable as per the standard in this screen, you can go to this new entries and you can create your own payment terms as well. So suppose we check just for any one of them. Suppose we check for 0002. Now over here you can see that we need to fill the code over here, and then you need to put the description, what the payment term description will be. Now this payment term will be applicable for customer or vendor. If it is applicable for both, you have to tick both of them. If you want this payment term to be applicable only for vendor, you have to tick only vendor over here. Now this payment term will be calculated on the basis of which date. Will it be a posting date or entry date or the payment date? Sorry, document date. Document date basically means the invoice date. Invoice date which is written on the invoice of the vendor. Posting date means the date on which you are punching the invoice. So an entry date means the actual date on which the document were posted by the user in the system. So these are three different dates. Now in normal cases, mostly the document date is taken to calculate the due date or the payment terms by any of the clients or any of the users. So now coming up over here, if you know that the terms of payment are different and there are discounts in it, in that case you go on this particular part and you fill those areas. So if there is a discount of 3%, if it is done less than 14 days, then you fill 3% 14 days, and if there is 2% discount within 30 days payment is done, then you fill it this, and if the next is 45. So the maximum you can have the percentage discount is for 2 line items 2 times, and the third will be the final on which the final payment need to be done. So this is up to you how you want to take it the system with, and then once you configure this you can save it and the payment term will be created. So in this way you can create your own payment terms, or even you can use the existing payment terms if it is applicable for that particular vendor. So this is how it works. Now moving up to the next is your defining cash discount for outgoing payments. Now moving to this particular case path, over here we define a discount account which will be taken up as a cash discount received while making outgoing payments. So let's see how it can be done in the system. So we'll be going to the SPRO screen /n SPRO. IMG screen, financial accounting, accounts payable. So let's move to the financial accounting part. Accounts receivable and payable, business transactions, outgoing payment. So in outgoing payment, now there is outgoing payment global setting. So outgoing payment global setting, now over here you can see the define account for cash discount taken. So over here you need to go and explore this, and this the chart of account has to be enter. Then over here you can see this is the screen, that is the transaction for cash discount received is SKE, and the transaction code for this is OBXU if you want to have the transaction code. So over here in this case you need to define the account over here. So clicking on this accounts where a GL account can be assigned to have the discount. So now in this case we need to select this text code, and then we need to click on this. Okay, save the rule first. So in this case if you save it first, and then you can see the option of putting a GL account has arrived over here. So in this case we assign the cash discount received GL in this case. So as of now if you go for F4 key in the keyboard, let's see whether I have created any ledger for cash discount received or not. So in this case as of now I have not created any cash discount received ledger. As of now you can see there is no cash discount received ledger in this. So what I will be doing now is, first I will be creating a cash discount received ledger, and then I will be assigning that over here. So for that I will be going to a new session in this over here, clicking on this, and then now we'll be creating a new ledger account over here with FS00. Now again I have to see that again cash discount received is a part of which group. So I need to check the group. It's basically a part of income. So income is of with 3 lakh 30000. So I have to explore from over here whether there is any ledger open with 3 series or not. So in case we check, there is only sales account over here, so we can now create 300001. So I will be creating 300001 under the head, under the group income. Income is a part of profit and loss account, and this I write it over here, cash discount are received. Same I will be filling up over here, cash discount received account. Now moving up to the next, I will be clicking over here star and posting this and clicking onto the line item display. No open item. Mind it, open item management is not relevant for profit and loss account related GL. So moving to the next, now over here we will be selecting G001 and save it, and your ledger will be created over here now. So OK to this, and your ledger 300001 is created. And in that case, now if you go back over here, now we can assign the ledger, in this case that is cash discount received ledger. So when you go to this, search the ledger, and you can see your ledger will be appearing over here. So this is where your cash discount received is coming up. Double click on this, this will be selected, and now you can save this over here, and your cash discount received settings have been done. So this is how you have to do this. Same way, your cash discount for outgoing payment has been successfully covered. Now the next is creation of vendor master records, and after that we will be doing unit testing. So this now we will be doing up in the next session, and as of now it's over. You can do this much with in your system. We'll be carrying on to further to this in the next session. Thank you.